My name is Lewis Harrison, and at 71 years old, I thought I had lived through enough of life's storms to know how to prepare for them. But nothing, no grief, no heartbreak, no disappointment, could have readied me for the moment that turned my world inside out. It started 2 weeks ago on what should have been a simple, quiet drive from Atlanta to the suburbs where my daughter Maya lived with her husband Jason. My wife Evelyn had driven down earlier to help with the miscarriage, as she called it. She said Maya needed her mother. For some reason, that explanation had never sat right with me. Miscarriages are devastating, painful, emotional, but Evelyn's voice on the phone had sounded tight, controlled, too controlled. Maya's voice had sounded thin, like she was speaking from underwater. For days, something had gnawed at my chest like a hungry dog. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. So I packed a bag, got in my car, and drove to them. I didn't announce it. I wanted to surprise them, or maybe I wanted to confirm what I already feared. When I pulled into their neighborhood, everything was absurdly normal. Sunlight on the tidy lawns, a breeze that stirred the dogwood trees. Children's chalk drawings faded on the driveway of the house across the street. Nothing about the scene hinted at the nightmare waiting inside the house I had helped my daughter move into 5 years ago. I parked in their driveway and grabbed the small paper bag of fresh blueberry muffins I'd picked up on the way. Maya loved them growing up. Evelyn liked hers warm with butter. I smiled at the memory. For a brief moment, the unease in my chest loosened. I walked up the stone path toward the porch steps. The house looked quiet, too quiet maybe, but I chalked that up to mid-afternoon drowsiness. I lifted my hand to knock. That's when a voice cut through the calm, sharp, panicked, desperate. "Stop! Don't go in there!" I froze mid-step. My hand hovered inches from the door, crossed the narrow gap between Maya's house and the next. A man burst out from his front door like he'd been shot from a cannon. He was older, maybe early 60s, a sturdy black man built thick in the shoulders and chest, like someone who had spent years in the service. His eyes were wide with urgency. He waved his arms at me so frantically I thought he might collapse. "Don't go in! I called 911. For a split second, my brain refused to process the words. It was like someone had spoken to me underwater, muffled and wrong. Then the weight of the sentence hit me. Called 911. Don't go in. Stop. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. I backed off the porch step, stumbling down the little walkway toward him, and, "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "My wife, my daughter." He grabbed my arm, not roughly, not violently, but with the firm, steady grip of someone trying to keep a panicked man from running into traffic. "You can't go in there, sir. I'm telling you, it's bad, really bad." "What happened? What did you hear?" My voice cracked like old wood. "My wife is in there, Evelyn, and my daughter Maya. What did you hear?" The man swallowed hard. For a moment, his face softened, not with pity, but with something like sorrow. "Started 10 minutes ago," he said, yelling. A man's voice, loud, angry. Then a woman shouted back, sounded terrified. My blood turned to ice. Then I heard something big fall, like heavy furniture being knocked over. Then glass shattering. He paused, his jaw tightening. Then a scream. Sir, a real scream, not a startled yell, the kind you hear once and never forget. My breath caught. "Which woman?" I choked. "Was it Maya or Evelyn?" He shook his head. I don't know." Those words were like a punch to my chest. He continued, voice low. "After that, it went totally silent. Dead quiet. That's why I called the police. I didn't want to wait." For a moment, I just stood there staring at him, the world tilting sideways. The breeze, the sunlight, the neat little lawns, they suddenly felt wrong, like decor on a stage set that didn't match the script. "Jason," I muttered. "That son of a..." I didn't even realize I'd said it out loud. "You know who might have done it?" the man asked. "I've known for years. I had never trusted Jason, not once, not from the very day Maya first introduced him at the community barbecue. Something about him, his smirk, the way he spoke like he was humoring you, the way he wrapped his arm around Maya like he owned her. He was always polite but never respectful. He treated me like a prop, treated Evelyn like a housemaid, treated Maya like a fragile little object that belonged on a shelf. He was a wealthy investor, came from old money, drove a car that costs more than the house I grew up in. He used to call me Lou instead of Mr. Harrison or Dad, even after I asked him not to. Evelyn, bless her forgiving heart, always said, "He's just nervous, Lou. He's trying to impress you." But I knew better. Men like him didn't get nervous. They got entitled. And now I was sure he had finally shown his true colors. As the seconds stretched, the air around us changed. It vibrated with an awful tension, the kind that makes the hairs on your arms lift. Then, sirens, loud, approaching fast. The police cruiser lights flashed red and blue across the houses, shattering the stillness. Two squad cars screeched to a stop in the middle of the street, officers jumping out before the wheels even fully halted. "What's the situation?" one of them barked at the neighbor. He stepped forward, pointing immediately. I heard a violent altercation, furniture slamming, glass breaking, a woman screaming for help. House went silent. No one came out. Called it in right away. The officers looked at each other, grim, alert. They moved toward the front door, hands hovering over their guns. Every part of me screamed to run in after them, but the female officer stopped me with a firm palm to my chest. "Sir, stay back. We need to secure the scene first." "That's my family in there," I snapped, voice raw. "My wife, my daughter." "We understand, sir, but you need to let us." I didn't let her finish. I pushed past her, nearly stumbling in my haste, but the male officer caught my arm. "Sir, you need to stay behind the line. I need to see my family. Do you understand me? My wife is in there." "We will bring them to you," the officer insisted. But that wasn't good enough. Nothing on earth could have held me still. Not at that moment, not with terror chewing through my ribs. The officers positioned themselves on either side of the front door. "This is the Atlanta Police Department," the male officer bellowed. "Open the door." Silence. A cold, heavy silence that seeped through the windows. The officer tried again, louder. "Open the door or we will force entry." Nothing. "Breach it," the male officer said, jaw locked. He stepped back and kicked hard right beside the doorknob. The wood cracked. He kicked again. The deadbolt splintered the frame. On the third kick, the door slammed open. The officers rushed in. I didn't wait. I tore up the steps and followed them inside, ignoring shouted orders behind me. Henderson came right after me, calling, "Sir, sir, wait." But I was already across the threshold, already in the foyer, already smelling it, the scent that would haunt me forever. Blood, a thick, metallic, coppery smell that sucker punched me in the gut. My vision blurred. The house was destroyed, a floor lamp smashed, a chair toppled, glass all over the hardwood like crystal snow. "Evelyn!" I shouted, stumbling forward. "Maya!" My voice cracked into pieces. The officers swept left and right. "In here!" the female officer yelled. I ran toward her voice, and then I saw her. My Evelyn. My heart didn't just stop, it disintegrated. She was lying at the bottom of the staircase, her body twisted, her eyes open and staring blindly upward. Blood pooled beneath her head, dark and widening, creeping across the cold tile floor. Evie? The sound that came out of me wasn't human. It was a broken thing, scraped raw from my chest. I collapsed onto my knees so hard they screamed in pain. "No, no, no. Evelyn! Oh, God!" Her hand was outstretched, palm up, fingers curled like she'd tried to grab something before she fell. Her wedding ring, the one I had slid onto her finger 45 years ago, gleamed dully beneath the smeared blood. "This wasn't just a fall," I whispered, trembling. This was violence." The officer dropped to her knees beside Evelyn and pressed her fingers to her neck. "I've got a pulse," she shouted. "Faint, but present. Get EMS rolling now." My lungs collapsed with relief and terror at the same time. "Evie, baby, I'm here," I whispered, reaching for her hand. "Sir, don't touch her," the officer commanded. "She might have spinal trauma." So I sat there, helpless, 2 feet away from the woman who had anchored my entire life. And then, a sob, a choked, guttural sob from somewhere above me. I lifted my eyes. At the top of the stairs, crumpled in the corner, hugging her knees like a terrified child, Maya, my daughter, my baby girl. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her shoulders shook violently. Maya, I shouted. Sweetheart, are you hurt? What happened? She lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were beached wide, empty, drowning in fear. She didn't look at me. She looked past me. Her hand shot out, shaking violently and pointed behind me. Her scream tore out of her like a wounded animal. Him! It was him! He pushed her! He pushed Mama! I spun around, and there, at the top of the landing, stood Jason. His shirt ripped, his face scratched, his phone still clutched in his hand, staring down at all of us, expression blank, cold. Jason stood at the top of the stairs like a ghost carved out of ice, unmoving, pale, and disturbingly calm. The sun through the skylight framed him in a cold halo, making him look almost unreal. His dress shirt, the kind he always wore even on weekends, was torn at the collar. His hair was disheveled. A thin scratch traced a red line down the side of his cheek. His phone hung uselessly from his hand, the screen flickering with a half-dialed number. For several seconds, the world held its breath. Maya was still pointing at him, her fingers shaking so uncontrollably that the knuckle looked like it might snap. Her voice echoed in my skull. He pushed Mama! He pushed her! My heart hammered so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Rage, hot, violent, animalistic, shot through me. If the officers hadn't been there, I swear to God I would have charged up those stairs and torn them apart with my bare hands. But the officers moved before I could take a single step. Sir, the female officer shouted up the staircase. Don't move. Stay exactly where you are. Jason blinked, slow, confused, almost like he had just woken up. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't step back. He just stared at the scene below him. The blood, my collapsed wife, Maya curled into a broken shape, me on my knees, and his face twisted. Not with guilt, not with fear, with something else, something unreadable. He started, voice thin and cracked. I didn't. Stop talking, the male officer ordered. Hands where we can see them. Now. Jason swallowed, throat bobbing. He lifted his hands, but sluggishly, as if they weighed 100 pounds each. I stood, my legs trembling, eyes locked on him. Every memory I had of him flashed through my mind like a string of red flags I had ignored for too long. The first dinner he joined us for. The way he called me Lou, like we were drinking buddies. The way he cut Maya off mid-sentence. The way Evelyn forced a smile, trying so hard to keep the peace. And beneath all that, a sense, an instinct, that Jason was not what he appeared. Now that instinct screamed inside me, clawing at my ribs. Jason, I roared, what the hell did you do? What did you do to her? He flinched like I'd struck him. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The officers moved up the stairs with practiced precision, one step at a time, guns holstered, but hands ready. Jason didn't resist. He didn't run. He didn't even back away. When they reached him, he let them guide him to the wall. Turn around, the male officer said. Please, Jason whispered, eyes flicking to me. I didn't. Turn around now. He obeyed. The cold snap of handcuffs echoed down the staircase. Maya sobbed harder, choking on her breath. He did it, she whispered over and over like a broken mantra. He did it, he did it, he did it. I wanted to run to her, to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay, even though I knew damn well nothing was ever going to be okay again. But my legs wouldn't move. They were rooted in the tile floor beneath me, like I had turned to stone. Evelyn, my wife, my partner of 45 years, still lying unmoving, her breath shallow, her pulse fragile. EMS is 2 minutes out, the female officer said, still kneeling beside her. Sir, are you all right? No, I was not all right. I was standing in my daughter's hallway, staring at the blood of the woman I loved more than anything. I felt like my soul had left my body and was hovering somewhere above, watching this nightmare unfold. But I nodded anyway because shock makes you do strange things. I need to get to my daughter, I managed to say. It's safe now, the male officer said. Go ahead. I stumbled toward the staircase. Halfway up, the world spun. I had to grip the banister to steady myself. My knees screamed with every step. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a boulder. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could see was Evelyn's hand on the floor, her wedding ring, the blood soaking into her silver hair. When I finally reached the landing, Maya lunged toward me, collapsing into my arms. "Daddy," she sobbed. "Daddy, he pushed her. He tried to hurt me too. He went crazy." I held her. God, I held her, my arms wrapped around her shaking frame, and for a moment she felt like the little girl who used to crawl into our bed after nightmares. Her tears soaked my shirt. Her fingers dug into my back like she thought I might disappear. "It's okay," I whispered, even though it was a lie. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here." But over her shoulder, through the blur of panic and grief, my eyes caught Jason's. The officers were leading him down the hallway into the guest room to separate him from the scene. He didn't resist. He didn't fight. But his eyes, they were terrified. Not guilty, not angry. Terrified. He mouthed something to me. A single word. "Please." I ignored him. Maya was all that mattered. I guided her back from the stairs and onto the carpet, letting her sit before her shaking legs buckled again. "What happened?" I asked softly. "Tell me everything." She shook her head violently. I I can't. Not now, Dad, please." "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. Breathe." But part of me, the part drowning in adrenaline, needed answers. "Did he push her?" I asked. "Maya, did Jason do this?" She recoiled as if the question itself burned. He, Mama tried to stop him. He grabbed her. Daddy, please don't make me." Her words dissolved into sobs. I brushed her hair back, kissing her forehead. "Shh, it's all right. You're safe, sweetheart." But I wasn't safe. Evelyn wasn't safe. None of us were safe. Not until I knew the truth. Behind us, footsteps pounded through the house. "Paramedics coming through." Two EMS workers rushed inside with equipment. Another officer guided me and Maya away from the staircase so they could stabilize Evelyn. I glanced down. They placed a neck brace on her, inserted an airway, checked her vitals, lifted her onto a stretcher. Her head lolled, her arm dangled, blood smeared their gloves. "Getting her to Grady," one paramedic said. "We need to move, now." I watched them carry the stretcher out the door. My Evelyn, my heart, the mother of my child, her life hanging in the balance. Something inside me broke. Maya buried her face in my shoulder. "Daddy, it's my fault. It's all my fault." "What? No, sweetheart. Why would you say that?" She shook her head violently again, crying so hard she was barely breathing. "No, I mean it," she whispered. "If I hadn't told her, if I hadn't said anything, Maya," I pressed, gripping her arms gently. "Tell me, what did you tell her?" She just cried harder. And somewhere down the hallway, Jason's voice finally rose. Not calm, not calculating, not arrogant. Raw, desperate. "Please, I didn't touch her. I tried to help. Somebody listen to me." An officer barked at him to stop shouting. Maya flinched so hard she nearly toppled over. "Daddy," she whispered, trembling. "Please don't let him near me. Please don't let him hurt me again." "I won't, I promise. I swear I won't." But a small, cold piece of doubt, tiny as a grain of sand, lodged in my chest. Jason's scream didn't sound like a man caught in guilt. It sounded like a man drowning. The house felt like it was breathing, slow, heavy, suffocating. Every inhale carried the metallic sting of blood, the chalky scent of shattered drywall, and something else Lewis couldn't quite name. Fear. Not just his own fear, someone else's. Something lived in the walls, in the silence between each police radio crackle, in the shadowed corners where the light didn't reach. Up the stairwell, he could hear it, a sound so small it didn't match the chaos. Tiny, hiccuping sobs. At first he thought the house itself was crying. Then he realized it was her. "Maya?" His voice cracked like he hadn't used it in years. "Baby, where are you?" Officer Green lifted a hand, signaling Lewis to stay behind him. "Sir, please, let us clear the scene." But Lewis didn't care about protocol, didn't care about orders, didn't care that he was a 71-year-old man who hadn't sprinted in a decade. His legs moved completely separate from logic, driven only by the primal terror clawing at his ribs. He pushed past the officer, his shoulder slamming into the wall as he stumbled up the steps. Each stare felt like a year, each breath like a knife. When he reached the landing, the world narrowed into one horrifying image: his daughter. Maya was curled against the wall outside the bedroom, arms wrapped around her knees, hair matted to her tear-streaked face. Her breath shook in jagged bursts, like her lungs were fighting to stay working. Her clothes were wrinkled, twisted, like someone had grabbed her and yanked. When she lifted her head and saw him, her face crumpled. Dad. That one word, that one broken, trembling syllable. It hollowed him out entirely. Lewis dropped to his knees so hard the impact rattled all the way up his spine. He didn't even feel it. All he felt was her, tiny, shaking, terrified, as he pulled her into his arms. She folded into him like she used to when she was 5 years old and afraid of thunderstorms. But this fear was different, older, deeper, terrifying. "What happened?" he whispered into her hair. "Sweetheart, what happened?" Maya's entire body seized with a sob. She didn't speak, just clung to him like he was the last stable thing in a collapsing world. Then her eyes shot up suddenly, wide, terrified, looking over his shoulder. Lewis froze. Something was behind him. He turned, and there he was, Jason, standing at the top of the stairs. His expression wasn't angry, it wasn't scared, it was blank. The kind of hollow stare that didn't match a bloody house, a collapsed woman, or a hysterical wife. His shirt was torn at the collar. His hair was mussed. His left eye had a fresh bruise blooming beneath it. A phone dangled loosely from his hand, screen shattered, barely holding on to life. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Maya's voice ripped through the silence like a knife tearing cloth. "He did it." Lewis felt his heart stop. Maya shoved herself off him and pointed at Jason with a shaking hand, her voice rising into a scream that cracked through every room of the house. "He pushed, Mom! He tried to hurt her! He tried to hurt me, too!" The hallway erupted into movement. Officers rushed forward. Hands went to holsters. Commands barked across the corridor. But Lewis didn't see any of it. His vision had tunneled down to Jason, his son-in-law, the man he had never trusted, the arrogant, smug, too-perfect businessman Maya had insisted was just misunderstood. Misunderstood? No, he understood now. He understood everything too clearly. "You," Lewis choked out, rising to his feet. "You touched my wife. You laid a hand on my daughter." Jason didn't react. He just blinked slowly, like he couldn't process the accusation. "Lewis," he said quietly, "I didn't." "Shut your mouth," Lewis roared, surging forward. Two officers slammed him back instantly, pinning him against the wall. "Sir, stay back!" Lewis wasn't listening. The world had gone red, blood red, floor red, rage red. He struggled so hard the veins in his neck felt like they were going to burst. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to protect his daughter, to avenge his wife, to rip Jason apart with his bare hands. But the officers held firm. One pressed an arm across his chest, another pinned his shoulder. A third blocked his forward momentum with a solid wall of Kevlar. Jason remained motionless as they restrained Lewis. He didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't even move his hands away from his sides. "What did you do to her?" Lewis spat. "Look at her. Look at my baby." Maya was still crying, loud, shaking sobs that rattled the walls. "Dad," she choked, He pushed Mom because she tried to help me. He grabbed me. He grabbed me so hard, She broke into another fit of sobbing so violent her entire body shook. Officer Green knelt beside her. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" Maya nodded furiously, then shook her head, then nodded again, as if she couldn't even sort through her own thoughts. I don't know. He was screaming. I was screaming. Mom fell. Her voice dissolved into broken gasps. Jason finally spoke again, his voice low, controlled, too controlled. "Lewis, Maya," he started. That's not what happened. Lewis lunged again with a roar. Officers shoved him back. Don't say her name. Jason held his hands up, but not defensively, almost pleadingly. Maya, you know I didn't hurt your mother. You know what really... Stop talking, Maya shrieked. Stop lying. Her voice cracked into a raw, animalistic scream that startled everyone. It didn't sound like fear. It sounded like pure, unfiltered terror. Jason looked at her, not with anger, not with guilt, with heartbreak. Maya, he whispered. Please. Officer Benedict stepped inward, hand hovering near his cuffs. Sir, we're going to need you to step away from the stairwell and sit down. Jason nodded slowly. He didn't argue, didn't run, didn't protest, which infuriated Lewis even more. Because guilt didn't always look like screaming, denying, or fighting. Sometimes guilt looked exactly like this. Calm, silent, waiting. When Jason finally sat on the floor at the end of the hallway, the tension in the house dropped just enough for Lewis to breathe again. But only barely. He pulled Maya close, her head buried against his chest. Baby, it's okay now, he whispered. I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. She sobbed harder. He tried to kill her, Dad, she whispered, voice raw. Mom tried to stop him. I tried to stop him. He grabbed me before she fell. I thought, her entire sentence broke apart like glass hitting concrete. Lewis's jaw clenched so tight it hurt. He glared over Maya's head at Jason, who sat staring at the floor, eyes wet, hands trembling faintly. That shook Lewis more than he expected. Trembling hands, not defensive, not aggressive, not indifferent, shaking, like someone who had seen something he couldn't handle. Lewis ignored the doubt trying to sneak into his mind. This man had destroyed his family. This man had hurt his child. This man had nearly killed his wife. There was no room for doubt. Not now, not after everything he'd just seen. As paramedics carried Evelyn out on a stretcher below, Maya clung even tighter to Lewis, sobbing into his shirt. Jason finally lifted his head. His voice cracked. I tried to save her. Lewis saw red all over again. If the officers hadn't been standing between them, someone else would have left that house on a stretcher. Because at that moment, Lewis Harrison, gentle, quiet, retired, 71 years old, wanted nothing more than to tear Jason apart. Lewis didn't remember walking down the stairs, didn't remember the officers speaking to him, didn't remember how Maya ended up seated on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders like a fragile porcelain doll that might crack from a wrong breath. Everything moved around him, but he wasn't really in his own body yet. All he could hear, over and over, was the sound of his daughter screaming, "He pushed her! He tried to hurt me!" Those words replayed like a broken record in his skull. He stood in the middle of the living room, fists clenched, so hard his knuckles looked bleached white. Officers whispered. Paramedics finished clearing the scene. The house felt colder, emptier, like something sacred had been ripped out of it. Then a voice behind him broke through the fog. Lewis? Henderson, the neighbor who had called out earlier, who had tried to warn him before he entered the house. A man Lewis barely knew, just a polite hello, the wave across their driveways, the occasional nod during garbage day. Now he looked different, smaller, pale, shoulders tight, eyes darting like he was holding something too heavy for the moment. Lewis turned slowly. What? Henderson took a breath that shook in his chest. There's something I didn't tell the officers yet, he said quietly. Something I need to tell you first. Lewis braced himself. He expected confirmation. Witness testimony, something like, I saw Jason shove Evelyn, or I saw him chase Maya, or I saw him throw something. Instead, Henderson looked away, down at the floor, like he was ashamed. You need to understand, he started. I wasn't trying to hide anything. I just wasn't sure what mattered. Lewis's tone hardened. Henderson, what did you see? The neighbor swallowed. Then his voice dropped so low only Lewis could hear him. I didn't see him hurt her, Lewis. I heard fighting, but it didn't sound like him. Lewis felt a cold stab in his stomach. What do you mean it didn't sound like him? Henderson rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous gesture Lewis had never noticed before. I've lived next door to them for 3 years, he said, and I've heard arguments. Normal stuff. Nothing like tonight, but last night, he hesitated. Lewis's voice sharpened. What about last night? Henderson finally met his eyes. Last night's voice wasn't Jason's. Lewis stiffened. Then whose was it? Maya's. The name hit Lewis like someone had punched him square in the chest. He blinked hard. No, you must have heard wrong. Henderson shook his head slowly. I'm not mistaken, Lewis. I heard her. I heard her yelling, and not scared yelling. I mean furious yelling. Lewis felt the room tilt slightly. Henderson continued, I heard something break. I almost came over then, but the yelling stopped suddenly, so I don't know what I thought. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was grief. I didn't want to intrude. Lewis stared at him, jaw tight. Even if she was yelling, that doesn't mean... I know, Henderson cut in softly, but that's not all. The knot in Lewis's stomach twisted tighter. Go on. Henderson took another deep breath, glancing toward the officers at the doorway before lowering his voice further. I saw something in the backyard earlier. Lewis's heart pounded. What did you see? A chair, Henderson whispered, a heavy wooden one, splintered, like it was thrown with force. Lewis exhaled shakily. Thrown? By who? Henderson hesitated again, but only for a moment. Maya. She threw it. Lewis staggered back a half step. Henderson continued before Lewis could respond. She didn't see me. I was at my kitchen window. She was pacing the yard, crying, muttering something I couldn't hear. Then she picked up the chair and he mimicked a violent swinging motion. Hurled it across the yard, hard enough it broke when it hit the ground. Lewis couldn't speak. His mind was trying to fit the pieces together, but none of the edges matched what he thought he knew, what he wanted to believe, and Henderson wasn't done. Then about an hour later, he said quietly, I saw Jason come outside. He was shaken, like he'd been crying, or scared. Scared? Lewis repeated, barely above a whisper. Yes, Henderson said. Scared. Lewis felt something inside him shift, just slightly, barely noticeable, but definitely there. He looked toward the stairs where Jason sat with his back against the wall, an officer standing guard near him. The man's head was lowered. His hands trembled faintly where they rested on his knees. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man watching his life burn down around him. Lewis swallowed, then forced himself to speak. Henderson, why didn't you tell the police this sooner? Because I wasn't sure if it mattered, the neighbor admitted, shame filling his expression. And because I didn't want to accuse your daughter of anything. I didn't want to believe what I saw. Lewis's breath caught. Neither did he. He shook his head, tension coiling up again like a tightened rope. Even if she threw something last night, that doesn't mean she hurt Evelyn. I agree, Henderson said quickly. I'm not saying she did. I'm just saying things weren't calm in that house. And it wasn't only Jason. Lewis felt his knees weaken. He didn't want this conversation anymore. He didn't want these possibilities, didn't want to hear anything that made the picture blur. Because in his mind, there was one story he could live with. Jason losing control. Jason hurting them. Jason being the villain Lewis always believed him to be. Anything else felt like a betrayal. To Maya, to his wife, to everything he had convinced himself of. But something about the way Henderson shifted nervously, like he was carrying more weight than he could hold, made Lewis ask, is there anything else? Henderson hesitated again, then nodded. When the officers ran in earlier, he said slowly, Jason wasn't the one shouting. Lewis frowned. What do you mean? When they broke down the door, it wasn't Jason yelling. Henderson's voice lowered further. It was Maya. Lewis frowned harder. She was screaming because of what he did to her. Henderson shook his head. No, I mean before that. I mean before anyone even saw Jason. She was already yelling, like she was in some kind of panic. Lewis's heart stalled in his chest. Henderson went on. And then when Jason finally appeared at the top of the stairs, he paused. Lewis, I've seen men who are violent. I've seen guilty men. That wasn't guilt on his face. It looked like fear, like he was afraid of what she might say. Lewis tensed. Or afraid of being found out. Or, Henderson said quietly, afraid she'd blame him for something he didn't do. The words sat between them like a weight neither wanted to acknowledge. Lewis turned away sharply, unable to look at Henderson any longer. He stared instead at his daughter across the room, still curled under the blanket, eyes red and distant. She looked fragile, broken, but also something else. Something he couldn't name. Something he didn't want to name. Officer Green walked toward them suddenly. "Henderson," he said, "we need your full statement now." Henderson nodded, but before he followed the officer, he touched Lewis's arm. Quietly, he said, "I'm not telling you your daughter is lying. I'm telling you the truth might not be as simple as it looks." Lewis's throat tightened. Henderson's voice softened. "And I think Jason knows something he's too scared to say." Lewis didn't respond. He couldn't. His world, so solid just minutes ago, was beginning to crack along fault lines he didn't want to see. But Henderson's last words wouldn't leave him. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not when the truth finally clawed its way to the surface. "I think Jason knows something he's too scared to say." Lewis turned slowly toward the stairs. Jason was looking at him now, not defiantly, not angrily, with eyes full of something Lewis had never expected to see in the man he hated. Fear and loneliness, and maybe something that looked disturbingly close to the truth. The house was silent now, the chaos of sirens, shouting, and breaking furniture had faded to a strange, tense quiet. The only sounds were Maya's shaky breaths and the occasional shuffle of paramedics checking on Evelyn outside. Lewis stood in the living room, heart hammering, staring at Jason across the hall. The man's hands rested in his lap, trembling slightly. His eyes didn't look defiant. They didn't look guilty in the way Lewis had always imagined a monster would look. They looked afraid, terrified even. And that terrified Louis more than anything. He took a step forward. "Jason," Lewis said, voice low and trembling, "I need the truth, every single detail, right now." Jason swallowed, lips trembling. His eyes darted to Maya, then back to Lewis. He shook his head slightly. I didn't do it," he whispered. "I swear, I didn't touch her. I didn't hurt Evelyn." Lewis' fist clenched. "Then explain. Explain everything, or I swear," Jason inhaled sharply. "It wasn't me. It was Maya." The words hung in the air like ice water poured into Louis' chest. "What?" His voice cracked. "Maya? My daughter?" "Yes," Jason said, voice shaking. "Maya, she didn't mean to. It got out of hand." Lewis felt the world tilt. He blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of it, but nothing fit. His daughter? Evelyn? Blood on the floor? Broken furniture? "Out of hand?" he demanded. She did this?" Jason nodded slowly. "Yes, it started as an argument. Maya, she's always been strong-willed, stubborn, but this time, she snapped. She didn't mean to push your wife, but she panicked. She grabbed her, they struggled, and Evelyn fell." Lewis staggered back as if someone had hit him. No, that can't be. My daughter?" His voice broke. "Evelyn?" Jason leaned forward, desperate. "I tried to help. I tried to protect both of them. I ran in. I was trying to separate them, and that's when Henderson called the police. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. I swear." Lewis could barely process the words. His mind was a storm of disbelief, horror, and confusion. He thought back to Henderson's words. "I think Jason knows something he's too scared to say." Lewis realized now, Henderson hadn't been protecting Jason. He had been trying to hint at the truth without accusing Maya outright. He looked at his daughter. Maya's face was pale, tear-streaked, eyes wide with terror. She avoided looking at him, staring instead at the floor, as though it were the only thing keeping her from crumbling entirely. "Maya," Louis said softly, but his voice trembled with emotion. Look at me, please." She lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were glossy with tears, full of fear and shame. "Daddy," she whispered, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean for this to happen. I lost control. I pushed her, and she fell. I was trying to stop him from hurting me. I just... She broke into a choked sob, collapsing into Lou's arms again. He held her tightly, feeling the fragile weight of her body shaking against him. His mind spun. How could his vibrant, strong-willed daughter, the girl who had always been so brave, have caused this? He realized something terrifying. The story he had been telling himself, that Jason was the villain, that he had hurt Evelyn and Maya, was only partially true. He had judged Jason based on his own instincts, based on fear and suspicion, and that instinct had been wrong. In Evelyn's blood on the floor, the broken furniture, the overturned lamp, it was not a crime planned by a maniacal husband. It was an accident, a tragedy born from panic, anger, and fear. Louis took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Maya, you need to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. No lies. Maya nodded faintly, trembling. It started when we were all in the kitchen. I had been arguing with Jason. He was trying to make me calm down about something. I don't even remember exactly what now. Evelyn tried to intervene. She tried to stop us. I didn't mean to push her, Daddy. She grabbed me and I panicked. Louis' chest tightened. Every word felt like a hammer to his heart. His wife, the gentle soul who had raised them all with love, had been caught in the crossfire of a daughter's panic. And now she was lying unconscious, fighting for her life outside. He looked at Jason, who was still seated on the floor. And you? He demanded. What were you doing? Jason's voice was hoarse. I was trying to protect them both. I tried to separate them. I tried to stop Maya from hurting herself or her mother. I didn't touch Evelyn. I didn't push her. I was terrified, Louis. I was terrified they would both get hurt. That's why I didn't move until the police came. Louis felt the rage he had carried for so long begin to dissolve into something else. Shock, grief, and an unbearable weight of guilt. He had almost condemned this man for a crime he didn't commit, almost destroyed Jason's life based on instinct and bias. And then Henderson stepped forward again, voice calm but firm. Louis, the truth is rarely simple. I knew you'd see what you wanted to see, Jason as the villain, but sometimes the most obvious target isn't the real one. Maya, she made a mistake. A terrible, tragic mistake. But she didn't mean to hurt anyone beyond what panic caused. And Jason, he did what he could to help. Louis turned to the neighbor. You knew all this? Henderson nodded. I suspected. I didn't interfere. I waited for the truth to become clear. Louis sank to the floor, exhaustion and relief washing over him in equal measure. He felt Maya collapse into his arms again, sobbing, uncontrollably. He whispered to her, It's okay, baby, it's okay. We'll fix this. We'll get through this together. Paramedics came back inside, gently lifting Evelyn onto a stretcher. Louis watched every step, holding Maya's hand, hoping, praying that she would survive. The truth had finally come out. The terrible, tragic human truth. And now they had to face the consequences together. It was a horrifying accident. I saw it, yes, a mistake born from fear and anger. But it wasn't malicious. It wasn't premeditated. And in the aftermath of the chaos, Louis realized something he had never understood before. Forgiveness, understanding, and the truth were the only way to survive the pain of this night. He squeezed Maya's hand, took a deep breath, and whispered, We'll tell the police the truth. We'll tell them everything. For the first time in hours, Louis felt a small, fragile sense of hope. The nightmare wasn't over, but the truth was finally out. And in that truth, perhaps, there was a chance for healing. As the paramedics wheeled Evelyn out into the ambulance, Jason stood quietly at the edge of the room, trembling. Louis glanced at him, not with hatred, not with fear, but with understanding. He nodded slowly, silently acknowledging that fear had guided them all, that instinct had led them astray, and that now only honesty could guide the next steps. The night was far from over. The healing would be long, painful, and uncertain. But the truth, finally revealed, was a beginning. And for the first time in hours, Louis Harrison believed that beginning might just save them all.